Sarah Martinez walked into the crowded coffee shop on a busy Tuesday morning, her dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore a long-sleeved shirt despite the warm weather, a habit she had developed over the years. The familiar sound of grinding coffee beans and chattering customers filled the air as she made her way to the counter. She worked as a nurse at the local hospital and had stopped by during her break to grab her usual coffee. The shop was packed with the morning rush, and she found herself standing behind a group of young women who seemed to be college students. As Sarah waited in line, she rolled up her sleeves slightly to check her watch. That simple movement revealed a small portion of a tattoo on her forearm. It wasn't much visible, just a few lines and what looked like part of a symbol, but it was enough to catch the attention of the girls in front of her. "Oh my God, look at that!" One of them whispered loudly enough for Sarah to hear. "She has some kind of military tattoo or something." The second girl turned around and stared openly at Sarah's arm. "Ew, that's so weird. Why would a woman get something like that? It looks so masculine and ugly." Sarah felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. She quickly pulled her sleeve back down, but the damage was already done. The girls continued their commentary without any regard for her feelings. "I bet she's trying to be all tough and cool," the third girl added with a laugh. "Like she thinks she's some kind of soldier or something. It's probably fake anyway." "Yeah, like those people who pretend they were in the military for attention," the first girl said, rolling her eyes. "So cringy. Real military people would never get tattoos like that." Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she clutched her purse. She had heard comments like this before, but it never got easier. The tattoo meant everything to her, and hearing these strangers mock it felt like a punch to the gut. "I can't believe people waste money on stuff like that," one of them continued. "And then they have the nerve to show it off in public. Like, we get it. You think you're special." The barista called the girls forward, but they were too busy laughing and pointing at Sarah to notice immediately. Other customers in the shop began to stare, some looking at Sarah with curiosity, others with judgment. "Ladies, I can help you now," the barista said again, louder this time. As the girls finally moved forward to place their order, they continued their conversation about Sarah's tattoo. They spoke as if she weren't standing right behind them, as if she couldn't hear every cruel word they said. "My dad would disown me if I got something that hideous," one of them declared while ordering her latte. "He always says tattoos like that are for people trying too hard to look important." Sarah closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She thought about leaving, about walking out of the coffee shop and forgetting about her morning coffee. But she had done nothing wrong. She belonged here just as much as anyone else. The girls got their drinks and moved toward the seating area, but they didn't stop talking. If anything, they seemed encouraged by the fact that other customers were now looking in Sarah's direction. "I wonder what she thinks she's proving," one of them said as they passed a table where an older man was reading his newspaper. "Like anyone cares about her fake military credentials." The older man looked up from his paper and glanced at Sarah, then back at the girls. He seemed uncomfortable with their loud conversation, but he didn't say anything. Sarah finally reached the counter and ordered her usual coffee with a quiet voice. The young barista, who couldn't have been more than 19, gave her a sympathetic look. "Don't mind them," he whispered as he prepared her drink. "Some people just don't know when to keep their mouths shut." Sarah managed a small smile and thanked him. As she waited for her coffee, she could still hear the girls laughing at their table. They had moved on to other topics, but the damage was already done. She felt exposed and vulnerable, like everyone in the shop was now looking at her and judging her. Where her coffee was ready, Sarah took it and turned to leave. She just wanted to get back to work, back to the hospital where she felt useful and respected. But as she walked toward the exit, she heard one final comment that stopped her in her tracks. "I bet she bought that tattoo design online," one of the girls said loudly. "Probably Googled cool military tattoos for wannabes and picked the first thing that came up." Sarah's hand tightened around her coffee cup. She had dealt with ignorance before, but this level of public humiliation was almost too much to bear. She thought about her brother, about the sacrifice that tattoo represented, about the pain she carried every single day. As she pushed open the door to leave, Sarah didn't notice the man in camouflage uniform who had just entered the coffee shop. He was tall and muscular, with short-cropped hair and the confident bearing of someone accustomed to command. His name tag read Commander Hayes, and he had been looking forward to a quiet coffee break between meetings at the nearby naval base. Commander Hayes had planned to grab a quick cup of coffee and review some paperwork, but as he stepped inside, he immediately sensed tension in the air. The coffee shop felt unusually charged, and several customers were glancing toward a table where three young women sat laughing loudly. He approached the counter and ordered his coffee, his trained ear picking up fragments of the girls' conversation. They seemed to be making fun of someone, though he couldn't quite make out the details. As a military commander, he had little patience for bullying of any kind. "Excuse me," he said to the barista as he paid for his drink. "Is everything all right in here? It seems a bit tense." The young barista looked uncomfortable. "There was a woman in here a few minutes ago. Those girls over there were making fun of her tattoo, saying some pretty mean stuff about military people and fake soldiers." Commander Hayes raised an eyebrow. "What kind of tattoo?" "I couldn't see much of it, but it looked military." The woman seemed really upset by what they were saying. "She just left." The commander's expression hardened. As someone who had dedicated his life to serving his country, he took any mockery of military service seriously. But what bothered him even more was the idea that someone had been bullied and humiliated in public. He took his coffee and found an empty table where he could observe the three girls. They were still talking and laughing, completely oblivious to the hurt they had caused. He pulled out his phone and sent a quick text to his assistant, letting her know he might be a few minutes late to his next meeting. Commander Hayes had seen enough cruelty in his military career to last several lifetimes. He had witnessed the worst of humanity during his deployments, but he had also seen the best. He had learned that sometimes the most important battles weren't fought on distant shores, but right here at home, in everyday moments when people needed someone to stand up for what was right. The girls' laughter grew louder, and he caught more of their conversation. They were now discussing other customers in the shop, making jokes about people's appearances and choices. It was clear that mocking the woman with the tattoo had just been the beginning of their entertainment for the morning. He thought about his own tattoos hidden beneath his uniform. Each one told a story of service, sacrifice, and brotherhood. He thought about the men and women he had served with, the ones who had come home changed, and the ones who hadn't come home at all. The idea that someone would mock those symbols, those sacred reminders of service and loss, made his blood boil. Commander Hayes finished his coffee and stood up. He had made a decision. He couldn't let this incident pass without addressing it. These young women needed to understand the impact of their words, and, more importantly, they needed to learn that their behavior was unacceptable. As he approached their table, the girls looked up with mild interest. They saw his uniform and his rank insignia, and their expressions shifted slightly. They weren't intimidated yet, but they sensed that this interaction might be different from their usual morning gossip sessions. "Good morning, ladies," Commander Hayes said in a calm but authoritative voice. "I couldn't help but overhear your conversation about the woman who was just in here." The girls exchanged glances, unsure of how to respond. One of them, apparently the boldest of the group, decided to stand her ground. "Oh, you mean the woman with the fake military tattoo?" she said with a dismissive wave. "Yeah, that was pretty cringy. I mean, who does that?" Commander Hayes felt his jaw tighten, but he maintained his composure. "What makes you think it was fake?" The question caught the girls off guard. They had been so certain of their assumptions that they hadn't expected anyone to challenge them. "Well, I mean, look at her," the second girl said. "She's just some random nurse or whatever. Real military people don't look like that." "And what exactly do real military people look like?" the commander asked, his voice still calm, but with an edge that made the girls shift uncomfortably in their seats. The girls looked at each other nervously. They hadn't expected to be questioned by an actual military officer about their comments. The confidence they had shown while mocking Sarah began to crumble under Commander Hayes' steady gaze. I don't know, the first girl said defensively. But she just seemed like someone pretending, you know? Like she was trying to get attention or something. Commander Hayes pulled out a chair and sat down at their table without being invited. His presence immediately changed the atmosphere. The casual cruelty that had filled the air moments before was replaced by an uncomfortable tension. Tell me more about this tattoo, he said calmly. What'd it look like? It was on her arm, the third girl offered hesitantly. Just some military-looking design. Probably something she found on the internet. Could you see any specific details? Any numbers, symbols, unit insignia? The girls shifted in their seats. They hadn't paid enough attention to the actual design to provide specifics. They'd been too busy judging and mocking to actually observe what they were criticizing. Not really, the second girl admitted. But it doesn't matter. People get fake military tattoos all the time to look cool. Commander Hayes nodded slowly. You're right that some people do get military tattoos without having served. But you seem very certain that this particular woman was faking. What evidence did you base that conclusion on? Evidence? The first girl laughed nervously. I mean, it was obvious. She didn't look like a soldier. And how should a soldier look? The question hung in the air. The girls realized they were walking into territory they didn't understand. They had made assumptions based on stereotypes and prejudices they had never been forced to examine. I guess tougher, more masculine, one of them ventured. Commander Hayes leaned back in his chair. I've served with some of the toughest, most skilled warriors this country has ever produced. Many of them were women. Some were nurses. Some looked exactly like the woman you were mocking. The girls began to look genuinely uncomfortable now. The boldest of the group tried to regain some ground. Well, even if she was military, getting tattoos like that is still weird for a woman. My dad says women in the military are just trying to prove something. What branch of service was your father in? Commander Hayes asked. He wasn't, but he knows people who were. I see. And you feel qualified to judge military personnel based on your father's secondhand opinions. The girl's face reddened. I didn't mean to offend anyone. We were just having a conversation. No, Commander Hayes said firmly. You were publicly humiliating a stranger based on assumptions you couldn't prove and stereotypes you've never questioned. There's a significant difference. He pulled out his phone and showed them a photo. It was a group picture of his unit from his last deployment. Men and women in full combat gear, faces dirty and exhausted but proud. This is my unit, he said. Can you pick out who the real soldiers are and who the fake ones are? The girls stared at the photo, unable to answer. The image showed diversity they hadn't expected. People of different sizes, ages, and backgrounds, all clearly professional military personnel. That woman there, Commander Hayes pointed to a figure in the photo, is Staff Sergeant Rodriguez. She's a medic. She has 3 Purple Hearts and saved more lives than I can count. She also has several tattoos commemorating her service and the friend she lost. He swiped to another photo. This is Lieutenant Chun. She's a nurse in the Navy Medical Corps. She served 2 tours in Afghanistan and has tattoos representing each unit she served with. The girls stared at the photos in silence. Their worldview was being challenged in ways they had never experienced. The woman you mocked today, Commander Hayes continued. Do you know anything about her story? About what that tattoo might represent? No, the first girl whispered. Then, why did you feel entitled to judge her? The question was simple, but it cut to the heart of their behavior. They had acted on ignorance and prejudice, and now they were being forced to confront the reality of what they had done. Commander Hayes put his phone away and leaned forward. I want you to understand something. Military service isn't about fitting a stereotype. It's not about looking a certain way or acting tough. It's about sacrifice, duty, and putting your life on the line for others. He paused, letting his words sink in. That tattoo you mocked might represent the loss of a family member in combat. It might commemorate a deployment where she saved lives. It might honor fallen comrades. You don't know because you didn't ask. You just assumed and judged. The second girl had tears in her eyes now. We didn't know, she said quietly. No, you didn't. But you spoke anyway. You cause pain anyway. And that's the problem. Commander Hayes stood up, his imposing figure casting a shadow over their table. I want you to think about something. Right now, that woman is probably back at work, trying to forget about the humiliation you caused her. She's probably caring for patients, saving lives, making a difference in the world. What are you doing with your day? The girls couldn't meet his eyes. The weight of their actions was becoming clear, and it was crushing. I serve with people who have given everything for this country, Commander Hayes continued. They've lost limbs, lost friends, lost pieces of themselves that they'll never get back. And they did it so that you could sit in this coffee shop and express your opinions freely. You placed a business card on their table. But freedom of speech doesn't mean freedom from consequences. It doesn't give you the right to hurt people based on your ignorance. The third girl picked up the business card with trembling hands. It had Commander Hayes' name, rank, and contact information for the naval base. What do you want us to do? She asked in a small voice. I want you to learn, he said simply. I want you to understand that your words have power. They can heal or they can harm. Today, you chose to harm someone who deserved better. Commander Hayes started to walk away, then turned back. That woman you mocked? She was wearing scrubs under her jacket. She had a hospital badge. She's probably saving lives right now while you're sitting here drinking overpriced coffee and gossiping about strangers. As he reached the door, he called back one more time. If you're truly sorry about what happened, you'll find a way to make it right. Not because I told you to, but because it's the right thing to do. The coffee shop fell silent after Commander Hayes left. Other customers who had witnessed the interaction went back to their conversations, but the atmosphere had changed. The casual cruelty that had seemed acceptable moments before now felt shameful and wrong. The three girls sat in stunned silence, staring at the business card on their table. Everything they thought they knew about military service, about strength, about what made someone worthy of respect, had been challenged in the space of a few minutes. Oh my God, the first girl finally whispered. What if he's right? What if that tattoo meant something really important? We were so horrible to her, the second girl said, wiping tears from her eyes. She probably felt so hurt. The third girl, who had been the quietest during the confrontation, spoke up. My grandfather was in Vietnam. He never talked about it, but my mom said he had nightmares for years. What if that woman lost someone in the military? What if we were making fun of something sacred to her? The weight of their potential mistakes settled over them like a heavy blanket. They had acted without thinking, without considering the human being behind the tattoo they had mocked. We need to find her, the first girl said suddenly. We need to apologize. How? The second girl asked. We don't even know her name. We just know she works at a hospital. There are only 2 hospitals in this town, the third girl pointed out. And the commander said she was wearing scrubs. She's probably a nurse. They gathered their things and left the coffee shop, their morning completely changed by the encounter with Commander Hayes. As they walked toward their car, they passed the window where they had been sitting. The reflection showed 3 young women who looked smaller and less confident than they had an hour earlier. I keep thinking about what he said, the second girl murmured as they reached their car. About that woman saving lives while we were just sitting there gossiping. We were so stupid, the first girl said, shaking her head. So incredibly stupid. They drove to the first hospital in silence, each lost in their own thoughts about the morning's events. The casual cruelty that had come so easily to them now seemed foreign and wrong. Commander Hayes had held up a mirror to their behavior, and they didn't like what they saw. At the hospital, they approached the information desk nervously. The receptionist, an older woman with kind eyes, looked up at them expectantly. Can I help you? She asked. We're looking for a nurse, the first girl said hesitantly. We need to apologize to her for something that happened this morning. The receptionist raised an eyebrow. Do you know her name? No, but she's in her 30s, dark hair, and she has a tattoo on her arm. She was at the coffee shop on Main Street this morning. I'm afraid I can't give out information about our staff to strangers, the receptionist said firmly. Even for apologies. The girls looked at each other in frustration. How could they make things right if they couldn't even find the woman they had hurt? Meanwhile, Sarah Martinez was finishing her shift at St. Mary's Hospital, the second hospital in town. The morning's incident at the coffee shop had stayed with her throughout the day, making it difficult to focus on her patients. She had dealt with judgment and ignorance before, but something about the public nature of the humiliation had hit her particularly hard. As she changed out of her scrubs in the locker room, Sarah caught sight of her reflection in the mirror. She looked tired, worn down by more than just a long day of work. The cruel words from the coffee shop echoed in her mind, making her question herself in ways she hadn't for years. Sarah rolled up her sleeve and looked at the tattoo that had caused so much mockery. It wasn't large or flashy. In fact, most people would probably walk past it without giving it a second thought. But to Sarah, it represented everything that mattered to her. The tattoo showed a medical corps insignia intertwined with a paratrooper's wings. Below it, in small, precise lettering, were the words "For Miguel," never forgotten, along with a date from 3 years earlier. It was a memorial tattoo, created to honor her younger brother who had died while serving as a combat medic in Afghanistan. Miguel Martinez had been everything Sarah aspired to be. He was brave, compassionate, and dedicated to helping others. When he joined the Army as a medic, Sarah had been both proud and terrified. She knew he would save lives, but she also knew the dangers he would face. The phone call had come on a Tuesday morning, much like this one. Miguel's unit had been responding to an IED explosion when they came under enemy fire. He had died trying to save a wounded soldier, never backing down even when the situation became hopeless. He was awarded the Silver Star posthumously for his heroism. Sarah had gotten the tattoo on the first anniversary of his death. It combined his military medical insignia with the paratrooper wings he had earned, along with his personal motto that he had lived by both in service and in life. To her, it was a sacred reminder of his sacrifice and her commitment to carry on his legacy of helping others. The girls at the coffee shop couldn't have known any of this, but their words had felt like an attack on Miguel's memory. They had mocked the symbol of his service, dismissed it as fake and meaningless. Sarah had wanted to tell them the truth, to explain what the tattoo really meant, but the hurt and anger had been too overwhelming. As Sarah gathered her things to leave the hospital, her colleague Jennifer approached her in the locker room. "Are you okay?" Jennifer asked with concern. "You seem distracted today." Sarah managed a weak smile. "Just a rough morning. Some people at the coffee shop were making fun of my tattoo." Jennifer's expression darkened. "What did they say?" "They called it fake, said I was pretending to be military for attention. The usual ignorant stuff." Jennifer had known Sarah for 5 years and knew the story behind the tattoo. She also knew how much Miguel's memory meant to Sarah and how deeply the mockery must have hurt. "I'm sorry that happened," Jennifer said, putting a comforting hand on Sarah's shoulder. "People can be incredibly cruel when they don't understand something." "I know I shouldn't let it bother me," Sarah said, her voice wavering slightly. "But it felt like they were disrespecting Miguel's memory, you know?" "Of course it did. And you have every right to be upset about that." As Sarah and Jennifer left the hospital together, they didn't notice the 3 young women sitting in a car in the parking lot. The girls had spent the afternoon driving between the 2 hospitals, trying to figure out how to find the woman they had hurt. They had finally decided to wait outside each hospital during shift changes, hoping to spot her. "There," the second girl said suddenly, pointing toward the hospital entrance. "That's her, the woman from the coffee shop." The 3 girls looked at Sarah as she walked toward her car with Jennifer. She looked tired and sad, nothing like the threatening figure they had built up in their minds during their mocking session that morning. "She looks so normal," the third girl said quietly. "Just like a regular person trying to get through her day." "She is a regular person," the first girl replied, the full weight of their behavior hitting her again. "A regular person who he hurt for no reason." They watched as Sarah reached her car and said goodbye to her colleague. She moved slowly, as if carrying a heavy burden, and the girls realized that they might have contributed to that weight. "We have to talk to her," the second girl said with determination. "We have to apologize." They got out of their car and approached Sarah before they could lose their courage. Sarah looked up in surprise as the three young women who had mocked her that morning walked toward her across the parking lot. Her first instinct was to get in her car and drive away. The last thing she wanted was another confrontation with these girls. But something in their posture and expressions was different from that morning. They looked nervous, ashamed, and genuinely remorseful. "Excuse me," the first girl said when they were close enough to talk. "We're the girls from the coffee shop this morning. We wanted to apologize." Sarah studied their faces carefully. She could see that they had been crying, and their earlier confidence had been replaced with genuine regret. "We were horrible to you," the second girl continued. "We said terrible things about your tattoo and about military service, and we had no right to do that. We didn't know anything about you or what your tattoo meant," the third girl added. "We just judged you based on our own ignorance." Sarah felt a mix of emotions. Part of her was still angry about the morning's humiliation, but she could see that these young women had genuinely learned something for whatever had happened after she left the coffee shop. "What changed your minds?" Sarah asked quietly. The girls looked at each other before the first one answered. "A Navy commander came into the coffee shop after you left. He heard us talking about what happened, and he made us realize how wrong we were. He showed us pictures of real military personnel," the second girl added. "Women who looked just like regular people, but who had served their country with honor. He made us understand that we had no right to judge anyone based on appearances." Sarah felt a surge of gratitude toward this unknown commander who had stood up for her. It meant more than she could express that someone had defended her and her brother's memory. "He told us that tattoos like yours often represent sacrifice and loss," the third girl said softly. "That they're sacred to the people who have them. We realized we might have been mocking something incredibly important to you." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. These young women couldn't know how close they had come to the truth, but their willingness to acknowledge their mistake and seek forgiveness touched her deeply. "Can you tell us what your tattoo really means?" the first girl asked gently. "We want to understand." Sarah looked at the three faces before her. A few hours earlier, these same young women had caused her profound pain with their casual cruelty. Now, they were standing in a hospital parking lot, genuinely trying to make amends for their behavior. She rolled up her sleeve and showed them the tattoo properly for the first time. In the afternoon light, they could see the intricate details they had missed that morning. The medical corps insignia, the paratrooper wings, the carefully lettered inscription. "This is for my brother Miguel," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the emotion she was feeling. "He was a combat medic in the Army. He died 3 years ago, saving other soldiers in Afghanistan." The girl stared at the tattoo with new understanding. The casual mockery of that morning now seemed not just cruel, but sacrilegious. "Oh my God," the second girl whispered, tears starting to flow again. "We were making fun of a memorial for your brother. We're so sorry," the third girl said, her voice breaking. "We're so incredibly sorry." Sarah nodded, appreciating their remorse, but still processing her own emotions. Miguel always said that people should be judged by their actions, not their appearances. He would have been disappointed in what happened this morning, but he would have been proud of what you're doing now. "Is there anything we can do to make this right?" the first girl asked. "Anything at all?" Sarah thought for a moment. "Learn from this," she said finally. "Remember that everyone you meet is carrying stories you can't see. Treat people with kindness, because you never know what battles they're fighting." "We will," the second girl promised. "We'll never forget this lesson." As the conversation continued, none of them noticed the figure watching from across the parking lot. Commander Hayes had finished his meetings for the day and had decided to stop by the hospital to check on a fellow veteran who was recovering from surgery. He had arrived just in time to see the three girls approaching Sarah, and he had stayed to observe the interaction. He smiled as he watched the genuine remorse and reconciliation taking place. This was exactly what he had hoped would happen when he confronted the girls that morning. They had taken his words to heart and had found the courage to make things right. Commander Hayes approached the group, and Sarah looked up in surprise as she saw his uniform and rank insignia. "Commander Hayes," he introduced himself, extending his hand to Sarah. "I believe I met these young ladies earlier today." The girls looked nervous, but not ashamed as they had that morning. They had done the hard work of acknowledging their mistake and seeking forgiveness. "You're the one who talked to them," Sarah said, shaking his hand gratefully. "Thank you for standing up for me." "Thank you for your service," Commander Hayes replied, looking at her tattoo with respect. "And thank you for honoring your brother's memory." Sarah felt a warmth spread through her chest. It had been a difficult day, but it was ending with understanding, forgiveness, and respect. "Miguel would have liked you," she told the commander. "He always believed in giving people second chances when they showed they were willing to learn." Commander Hayes nodded toward the three girls. "These young women have shown real character today. It takes courage to admit when you're wrong and to make amends." The first girl stepped forward. "Commander, thank you for opening our eyes this morning. We needed to hear what you told us." "The important thing is that you listened," he replied, "and that you acted on what you learned." As the sun began to set over the hospital parking lot, an unlikely group stood together in a moment of understanding that transcended their differences in age, background, and experience. Sarah had found healing in forgiveness. The girls had discovered the power of empathy, and Commander Hayes had witnessed the best of human nature triumph over ignorance and cruelty. Sarah looked at her tattoo one more time before rolling down her sleeve. For the first time since that morning, it felt like the sacred memorial it was meant to be, rather than a source of shame and humiliation. "Miguel always said that every day was a chance to make the world a little better," she told the group. "Today, all of you helped prove him right." As they parted ways that evening, each person carried with them a renewed understanding of the power of words, the importance of empathy, and the possibility of redemption when people have the courage to do what's right.